All right, stand by. 10 seconds.
Camera one. Ready, camera two.
And cue talent.
2, 1.
Roll for record.
The fourth GOP debate's in the history books, and it was a humdinger. I'm John Phillips, and this is The Rundown. In what was probably the sharpest exchange of the night, Governor John Kasich of Ohio assailed Donald Trump's stated intention to deport illegal aliens. Jeb Bush piled on, saying deportations are, quote, not possible, doesn't embrace American values, and would tear communities apart. He went on to say that they're doing high fives in the Clinton campaign right now when they hear this. Ted Cruz then jumped in on Trump's side, saying it's offensive that Amnesty opponents are labeled anti-immigrant and proclaiming that the Democrats are laughing because if Republicans join Democrats as the party of amnesty, we'll lose. There were also big divisions exposed between the candidates in other areas, like whether the American military should be the world's police force. To talk about what happened and where the debate has moved the race, joining me right now from Dallas, Texas is author and political satirist Scott Ott, and here in sunny Southern California, PJTV contributor and stand-up comic Stephen Cruiser. All right, so let's go ahead and start knocking down these questions one by one. I was making mental notes last night as I was watching this debate. I want to pick your brain about. Question number one, who's waking up this morning and writing a check to Jeb Bush?
Bob Dole. Bob Dole endorsed Jeb Bush. That was it. Bob Dole, but he was a little confused about what he was doing. And Jeb Bush and Barbara Bush. Those are the people that are doing that right now. I mean, Jeb had a okay debate last night relative to his previous ones, which is like saying, okay, I'm not as loaded as Keith Richards right now. So it's really, the bar
I
is weird.
disagree, because being irrelevant is not as harmful as being aggressively obnoxious. He was aggressively obnoxious last night to me.
In the first part, near the end, I don't think he was as obnoxious. He mellowed out a little bit, but he's still a nothing burger. He needed to come out swinging. He needed to have batting practice and just keep launching them over the fence. That's what he needed to do last night, and he kept hitting infield dribblers all night long. He might have gotten a couple under the legs of the second baseman, but he needed some home runs. He had none.
All right, Scott, did Jeb give his donors anything last night?
Well, one hopes he'll give their money back, but I don't see that happening anytime soon. No, I think that Jeb Bush, if he has any chance of surviving this process, really needs to start focusing not just on saying, hey, look, I was a successful governor, I did it, but in talking about how it gets done. Because I think even though last night's debate was far and away the best forum we've had so far for the Republicans, substantial questions, legitimate answers, not a lot of cutesy, stupid questions and tit-for-tat stuff, but nobody is saying how they will actually accomplish their ideas. So you can get up there and you can talk about a fair tax or a flat tax or changing the whole tax code or abolishing the IRS, but nobody is saying, look, here's the pathway to get that done. And if Jeb Bush has anything, he has a track record where he can say, look, we made some conservative reforms in Florida. Let me tell you how we did it and how that applies at the national level.
Well, in their defense, you can't really get into too many specifics in 60 seconds and keep people entertained and keep their eyeballs on you. You have to speak in generalities, and that's really what presidents do anyway. I mean, they lead the government in a particular direction, and then the cabinet secretaries and others kind of fill in the details.
But to what Scott said, though, if you were a governor, like a two-term governor especially, you should be able to point to the name of a policy that kind of did what they're talking about without getting into the wonkish details of it. You should be able to say, we did this in Florida, we did that in Florida, we did, that's the kind of thing. And you don't hear John Kasich doing a lot of that because he hasn't been a conservative since he's been a governor. That's why he keeps talking about his congressional career all the time, because he's been a lunatic, populist, moderate Democrat as a governor.
Well, speaking of Florida, did you see that awkward exchange between Jeb Bush and Marco Rubio as they cut to a commercial break? Rubio walks over to Jeb to shake his hand, and Jeb does not acknowledge his existence.
That pettiness is really, I think he's so old school he doesn't know that pettiness is seen and talked about all over the media landscape, and it makes him look even worse.
It reminded me of any time that Stephen Green comes up to Scott Ott.
What were you looking? What kind of middle school thing is that? I mean, I think Marco was just coming over to pass Jeb a little folded up paper note from Donald Trump about how cute Donald thinks Jeb is. I mean, who cares about this kind of sophomoric stuff?
What the heck was John Kasich thinking last night? I'm watching this debate, and you got 9 people on stage. or not 9 people, I think it was 8 people. And most of them were pretty much on the same page on the minimum wage and other big economic issues, as Republicans tend to be. But John Kasich seemed like he belonged on the Democratic stage when he was talking about economics, when he was talking about immigration, when he was talking about anything related to his political philosophy. That's not the John Kasich that was in the Congress that was essentially one of Newt Gingrich's chief lieutenants. Being governor of Ohio has changed him fundamentally.
He's a huge champion of the Medicaid expansion. He uses hardcore progressive talking points to sell it to the people. He's one of these Republican governors that pretends federal money is free and nobody has to pay for it. He's been thoroughly awful. This is an entire campaign predicated solely upon the fact that he's from Ohio and ostensibly he can deliver Ohio. There is nothing in the way of his policies or politics right now that would want anybody who's a conservative, who's even a moderate Republican, to want to vote for him.
You know, Scott, if you look at the consultants that have been hired by John Kasich, it's the same group that was behind John Huntsman last time around. And when I look at John Kasich during that debate, and I look at how he's presenting himself when he's doing the TV interviews, I see a whole lot of John Huntsman in him. There's one problem, though. John Huntsman lost. What's he thinking?
Well, I will say this for the consultants, because I know somebody got to John Kasich in between the last debate and this debate. And it wasn't so that he could become more aggressive and insert himself into the debate more. It was so that he could comb his frickin' hair. I don't know if you remember from the last debate, he looked like he just rolled out of sleeping in a dumpster. So in this case, at least his hair is groomed, but he still came across like Jim from Taxi. I mean, he just all of a sudden started blurting out these things that you would expect from the Clinton campaign. I sent a text message to a friend of mine, and I said, Clinton Kasich 2016. That's what he seems like he's doing. He's positioning himself to get some sort of appointment in the next Democratic administration.
Talk to me about the front runners, because in the first debate, Donald Trump dominated. Donald Trump did not dominate this debate. He didn't have most of the questions directed to him. Or even in the last debate, when questions were directed to someone else, it was always about Donald Trump. How did he do?
He was more serious, I think. He was less snarky, and that a lot. Kudos to the moderators for that, because the moderators, I just tossed the whole CNBC thing out, but the moderators in the other debates were like, Ms. Fiorina, Donald Trump said this about you, blah, blah, blah. What do you say about that? I thought Jake Tapper did way too much of that in the Reagan Library debate. They were trying to pit them against each other, so they didn't do that last night. So he talked a little more about things. He was a little more serious. He wasn't going out there trying to just, just personally level everyone. I thought he was solid for most of the night, because he didn't go too far off the rails. He's got turf to protect now, and I thought he protected it just fine.
Here's what I think Donald Trump did last night very effectively, and he had an assist from Ted Cruz. He framed his quintessential position on illegal immigration and being a hawk on the border as an economic issue and not a social issue. And in that exchange between Trump and Cruz versus Kasich and Bush, there's no question in my mind that Trump and Cruz got the best of them. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree that for those who believe, and you're probably one of them, that American jobs are suffering because of immigrants coming north from Mexico, I think that's a great argument. They made that case. They did it very well. And obviously, it is a bread and butter, a pocketbook issue. And if you can portray it that way, then I think you get a big chunk of the voters. So, yeah, I think Trump and Cruz both played that note very well.
Dr. Ben Carson, who is leading in some polls in Iowa, last night was not the focus of the debate, as the same thing is true with Donald Trump. But I don't think he committed any huge gaffes, any big errors. I think that the people that like Carson are going to continue to like him, and I think he's going to move on kind of where he is right now.
Carson's thing so far is he does have a little gaffe streak going away from the debates, but during the debates, he's just remarkably nondescript. Nobody remembers anything Ben Carson says in a debate. So the people that love him, you're right, still love him, and everybody else, even if you want to dislike him, you sit there and go, he just gets done with a response, and I don't know what he just said. That caliphate thing he went off on last night, while he was saying it, I was trying to figure out what he was saying, and he was just like, I'm going to destroy, and the generals told me, and I had Lucky Charms this morning. It's just, yeah.
Scott, when you look at people that like Ben Carson, you talk to them, you ask them why they like him. They love two things. they like the storyline, and they like his likability. And I don't think he did anything last night to damage his likability.
You're absolutely correct. And that caliphate answer, by the way, was an acid trip. What a long, strange trip it was. And but I will tell you something that Ben Carson did last night that I thought was very well done, and that was his description of how proportionality in the tax code is important. He also, I think, did a pretty good job of framing the issue of the minimum wage as being one that's harmful to low-wage workers. And Marco Rubio came in and added to that very well when he talked about, you don't want to get in a situation where machines are cheaper than people to hire. So I do think Carson did that memorably. And in these debates, I think really the whole contest is, can you do one thing that sticks with people? When Marco Rubio said last night that that philosophers get paid less than welders, when he was talking about the importance of vocational education, that's like a soundbite that will stick. And I think Carson finally nailed down his whole sort of tithing analogy with proportionality in the tax code in a way that I thought was effective.
Was Marco Rubio the sleeper last night? Because those other two establishment Republicans, Kasich and Bush, in my opinion, self-destructed.
Yes.
And Rubio had good lines, and Rubio can straddle that line between the establishment and the Tea Party wing of the Republican Party. I thought he had a very effective answer that Scott just alluded to between being a welder and being a philosopher. And he speaks in the people's language. People understand him.
Yes.
He's not speaking above your head. And I think there is a likability aspect to Marco Rubio that people see in Ben Carson that's there as well.
Yeah, Marco's very, especially when he's speaking about foreign policy, I think he's miles ahead of everyone else when he starts giving foreign policy answers. I like him there, but he's always had that likability, and he has not always been the establishment guy. He's only been the establishment guy for the last year. He was the Tea Party.
He plays it both ways.
He was the Tea Party guy. That's how he got elected. Charlie Crist was the establishment guy he was running against, but he's very well spoken. He's very, but you're right. He's wonkish without sounding wonkish. That's what you hit on that there. That, I think, is what's great about it. Was he the one that called Rand Paul an isolationist too, or was that Cruz?
Yes. I don't remember. It might have been him.
That was Marco.
Yeah, so that was a sex. So he had two that he hit out of the park, I thought, last night. It was the one with the welders thing, and the other one was calling Rand Paul an isolationist.
You know what I saw last night in Marco Rubio, Scott? I saw the candidate that Scott Walker wanted to be. You saw the guy who speaks in plain English, who has admirers in the establishment wing and admirers in the Tea Party wing, and a guy that just looks good, and he's young, and he's fresh. Did you see that same thing?
Absolutely. And a friend of mine texted me and said, this is our John F. Kennedy, in the sense of the charisma and the ability to communicate and connect with people. And like you said, to be able to speak in plain language, to be able to, get his message across. He has a way of doing something that no other candidate can do, in that he has a multi-point plan, essentially. I think it's 5 points. But when he says it, he doesn't say, I have a 5-point plan, point number 1, point number 2, which poor Ted Cruz struggled on and wound up eliminating the Commerce Department twice last night. But Marco Marco just tells the story. He just comes across, and what Marco does that nobody else does, with the possible exception of Carly Fiorina, is to really make you believe that America's best days are ahead of her, and we can get there, and liberty is the answer.
There was another thing I wanted to mention about Marco is his campaign's getting very nimble and adept right now, and not just his campaign. I know that there's no coordination with super PACs, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, and everything, but there was an ad last night that ran for Marco that my friend Ben Howe made for How Creative that was originally supposed to be kind of an attack ad on Jeb Bush, because Jeb's supposed to be spending $20 million annihilating Marco Rubio, and at the last minute they decided to change the tone of the ad, not make it an attack ad on Jeb Bush. So the people surrounding Marco are getting adept and nimble, and the whole machine, the things are falling into place well for him right now. They're very flexible and nimble and working well.
Did Chris Christie do good enough in the undercard debate work his way back up to the
He
adult
did,
table.
if anyone was watching. I haven't seen the numbers on that yet. He had a great debate. Christie's great in front of a camera. Whether you like his politics or not, I could watch him in a debate all the time. And I don't agree with a lot of what he does. He's the only Northeastern Republican who I can stand to listen to for more than 3 minutes. So, yeah, I mean, but yeah, if people were watching, yes, I pay $105 a month for cable, and I didn't have Fox Business on my lineup. So, okay.
All right, Scott, who, in your opinion, was the biggest loser last night?
Well, it's hard to say because, you know, do you mean it in the sense of, oh, how the mighty have fallen? Or do you mean it in the sense of, oh, go away already? And I think in the oh, go away already category, I think John Kasich is in the oh, go away. I wouldn't have wanted to put him in the undercard. He should have been sitting at home drinking beer with Lindsey Graham. So I think that he was definitely a loser there. I think Jeb Bush can hang around for as long as he likes. He's not going to cause any trouble, and he's not going to do himself any favors. So he's not a big hindrance. Bobby Jindal is, I think, the underrated sort of potential MVP who never quite reaches that potential because he can't slow down and put a little emotion into his voice. He is a machine gun of facts. And when he's done talking, you're like, you know, okay, Captain Red Bull, put it down, step away.
For the record, if they had a drink, Kasich would be having a beer, Lindsey Graham would be having a mint julep.
Yes.
Who was the biggest loser?
Speaking of mint juleps, Lindsey Graham, because he dominated the last 2 undercard debates and he wasn't even on it last night. So I think he's the biggest loser overall of the night and was going in because of that.
You're both right for runners-up. Biggest loser last night, CNBC. Because
Yeah,
Fox
CNBC,
Business showed that you could do it right.
Yeah.
And CNBC was exposed as just another
I
arm
never
of
doubted
MSNBC.
Cavuto, though, because I'm not the biggest fan of cable news, and Neil Cavuto is one of the only ones I can consistently watch. So I had faith in Neil, and he didn't do wacky tie last night. He came out with a normal tie. He didn't have some like pink thing with Jerry Garcia's tongue hanging. So it was fun.
All right, that's all the time we have for today, but now it's your turn. Who won the debate? More importantly, who lost? What candidate best represents your positions on amnesty for illegal aliens and any of the economic issues they spoke about last night? Tell us what you think in the comments section below. I'm John Phillips. Thanks so much for watching The Rundown.